And this is a cooperative game where players are going to be managing their own fire department. The main board represents an entire city where fire is going to be spreading and growing each and every round, and players are going to be using their actions to try and manage this and keep things under control. Each game will have some different objectives that players are trying to achieve before the end of the game if they want to win, and you're going to be determining those objectives by drawing one of the objective cards. Each of these cards will also specify a certain amount of scenario points, and if players allow certain bad things to happen in the game, you can actually lose these points, and if you lose the amount as specified on that card, then all the players do lose the game. You'll also lose the game if any civilians or firefighters die, so you also don't want that to happen. But this is a game where players are going to be feeling the pressure because you're actually going to be fighting against time. The way that players are going to be performing their actions each and every round is that each player is going to have 2 action dice, and then they're going to be rolling those dice and performing the action associated with the icons that they roll. There's no limit to the number of actions that players can perform on the round, and players can re-roll their dice as many times as they want to try and get the actions that they need. But at the start of each round, you're going to be starting a 2-minute timer, and players are only allowed to perform their actions within that time limit. Each player can also only move and use the fire truck of their player color, which means that you are going to be a little bit limited with your options, but also means that you're going to want to talk to the other players, work with them, and try and figure out which player is going to be taking care of which fires, or if you're going to be working together to do so, depending on the actions that you're rolling and the position of your vehicles out on the board. The different actions that players will be able to perform with their dice are to move their fire trucks, their water trucks, or the ambulance around to new locations out on the board. Of course, your fire truck is going to be used for putting out fires, and it can carry a certain amount of water on its own, but the water truck acts as a mobile unit in order to get more water out to your trucks, but you do have to load that at the fire station. There's also the ambulance that players will be using to take rescued civilians off the board, but players will also be able to move individual firefighters, which can also move civilians to safer locations, and players can also use one of the actions to increase the supply of water dice at any of their stations. And of course, there is an action to try and extinguish a fire, but in order to do that, you need to have a hose and a firefighter on that space, and then you need to have a fire truck adjacent to that space. You're then going to be rolling an amount of water dice from your supply, and then trying to get values that are above the water value on that space. Rolling successes will help you get rid of those fire tokens, but of course there are some special action cards players can acquire as well, and there is an action to use these cards, and you'll be wanting to take advantage of these to try and avoid any very bad situations out on the board, because once that 2 minutes are up, that's when all the bad stuff is going to happen. First thing that players are going to be checking for is any spaces that have both a person and a fire token, and any spaces that meet that requirement are then going to cause that person to get injured. Doesn't matter if this is a civilian or a firefighter, you're going to be putting an injured person token there and taking away the one that was there previously. But if there is a fire token in a space that already has an injured person, then that person's going to become a casualty, and like I said, any casualties cause you to lose the game, so you really don't want that to happen. But after you've checked all that, and if you haven't lost the game, you're then going to be checking for any of the spaces that have 3 fire tokens in them. For each one of those spaces, you're going to be drawing an event card, which is going to be adding more difficulty to the game, usually specifically in that location. This can cause all sorts of negative things to happen that the players are going to have to deal with. But if there are 4 fire tokens within a space, then that space is completely destroyed. And if you lose too many spaces out on the board, that is one way that you can lose the game. There's also a few different types of hazard tokens that can appear on the board throughout the game. And of course, if there's any fire on those spaces at this point in the game, that's going to have some negative effects as well, usually causing that fire to spread in various ways. But as if you didn't have enough to worry about, there is another type of token that can appear out on the board, and these are called distress call tokens. And these are actually going to have a number on them, and they're going to be counting down the number of rounds that players have to try and respond to that distress call. And for each of these tokens, you're going to be drawing a distress call card, and depending on if you're early, on time, or late, you're going to have various different consequences when you get your fire truck to that location. After that, each location with a fire token is going to get an additional fire token added to it, and then the next round begins, and the game continues like this until the players have either lost the game or completed a preset number of rounds, and then you're going to be checking for your win condition. If the players make it that far and have also accomplished their win condition, then they win the game. And if you are interested in this one, you can check it out. I'll have links to the campaign in the description below.